Hey guys, welcome back to my channel today. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys my thoughts on this new palette from Tarte. This is the Icy Betch Palette. This is the palette that they teased us with last April Fools. They have officially made it into a palette. I'm going to be sharing with you guys swatches, comparisons, as well as how I got this look today using the palette with a little bit of help with some glitter. And I also wanted to touch on my thoughts at the end of the video as to whether I think this palette here is a complete copy from Jeffree Star's Blue Blood palette. So if you want to know all of my thoughts on this new palette and whether or not I think it is worth the money or not, then just keep watching. Side note, I do have a guest on my video today. He is right behind me here. If you guys don't know who that is, I don't know if we can be friends. Just kidding. But if you do, I'm a Friends fan too, and he is just the cutest thing ever, so I wanted to put him in the background. Let me know if you know who that is, and comment down below if you know his name. So first of all, let's talk about the outer packaging of this palette. So this is a classic Tarte packaging when it comes to the base of the palette here. It does have a very interesting top though. As you can see, it does shine kind of from like some blue to some purples. So in theory, it looks kind of cute, but when you actually see the palette in person, although it's super cute, this top thing is actually a sticker. So it doesn't have any shield covering it. It's just a sticker. I can literally peel it right off. I'm going to show you how far I can go. I'm just going to see. It's like glue. Like you can see the glue. I wonder if you can kind of see that on camera. Ugh, maybe not. All right, do you see that just on the corner there? It's lifting already, so I can technically, in theory, lift this right off, which is really annoying. It does cheapen the palette in my opinion, and even though it is a cheaper price point, this is where I think they cut the corners, because if you look at a Tarte Toasted palette, for instance, or a Tartelette in Bloom, it does have like a piece of like plastic over top. So even though it might be a graphic sticker underneath, it is protected. So this is something that is a little bit strange to me, but you know what? It is what it is. Speaking of price tag, this does retail for 24 American dollars or 29 Canadian dollars. It's right now available at Tarte as well as the Sephora app. It is online only though. I don't believe this is in Sephora stores as of yet, but this is April 1st today that I'm filming this, so it could be later on. As I'm looking at the Sephora app, for some reason, this is on the Canadian side as of today, but I do not see it on the American side anymore. It was on the American side this past weekend. I did see it on the Sephora app US, but as of today, it is officially only on Sephora Canada. I don't know if it's a glitch and it'll be popping up later on once again, but that is super strange to me. Now, when you open up the palette, you will see a gorgeous mirror. It is the size of the lid, which I do appreciate. And then you see the shadows themselves. So we do have 9 shadows in here, and we also have a large pan highlight. Now this is an interesting palette because it does have 5 mattes and 4 of their lustrous shades according to the description. I would agree with that. That's exactly what is presented in the palette. And then we have a highlight that is quite icy, quite white, and it does have a tinge of a shimmer to it. Now as you can see by the palette here, it is definitely not even when it comes to shades because they added this highlight, so it takes up about 1/3 of the palette. And then we have the shadows on the other side, and to me this is something that makes it look a little bit untidy and incomplete or maybe rushed or something, because it just doesn't look even in my eyes. And I know that's such a small little tidbit, but that's exactly what I think. I think of it and I'm like, they should have just done all eyeshadows across the board. Ideally what they should have done is just release the palette that they had teased us with a year ago, because this is not that palette. I'm going to insert a picture of the April Fool's palette, and as you can see, although the shades are very similar to this palette they've created, obviously, I don't like how it's not like formulated like the Toasted palette or the Tartelette in Bloom palette, where they have those even lines of columns of pigment and their nice packaging as well, which I really wish they would have done. This to me just looks like it was whipped together, so unfortunately that is a big bummer about this whole entire release. The shades do kind of smell like vanilla, that's another thing. Like it's quite sweet smelling. It's not at all pungent like the Too Faced palettes, but if you stick your nose in there, you will see that it smells of vanilla. And they do say in their description box that it is a natural fragrance that they've added in after the fact. So it's not apparently any artificial vanilla. Apparently it is all natural. They also claim that this palette has the Amazonian clay formula that we have come to love from Tarte. So that is something as well that even though the price point is lower, they're promising the quality is still the same. Now for the look that I created today, this is something, you guys, obviously this is very dramatic for someone like me. If you guys have been on my channel for a while and just watched some of my videos, you'll know that this is not a look I typically go for. So let's talk about how I created this today. First, I went in with my Wayne Goss number 18 and I picked up the shade Heather. This is a very ill pigmented shade in my opinion. So it's lighter in color, but it's also lighter in pigment. I did have to build this up quite a bit. I would say the amount of layers I put on my eyelid was at least 3 to 4, and I am using a good brush, so it doesn't make any sense. When I picked it up with my brush as well, there was a little bit of kickback, but the translation on the lid is that it is incredibly light and it definitely has to be built up. Next, I went in with my MAC 217 and I picked up the shade Georgina. And this is one that was a lot more pigmented. Right away, I could see that blue pigment as seen in the pan. It was amazing. It seemed to blend out really nicely as well. But what I found compared to that first shade was that this one definitely packed a pigment punch. Next, I picked up the Wayne Goss number 17 and I used the shade Cheryl. This is one I wanted to smoke out the outer edge with, and that's exactly what I did do. This one is well translated very nicely on the lid, but I do have a bit of a warning about this shade. So this is one that kind of created this look from more of a, I guess, softer look to more of a dramatic look. And the reason is because this one blends quite far really quickly. So I found that when I was blending out the edge, I just saw it kind of trailing up and up and up on the eye, and I was like, oh no, this is going to turn very dramatic very quickly. So this particular shade really blends out and it literally goes quite far. So I would just make sure that you are, especially if you're a beginner, start really, really slow and stick right to the edge, because if you pull it up at all, you will see it translate higher and higher on the lid. Now, lastly, what I wanted to do was just add some spotlight to the center of the lid. I picked up my Sigma E60 and I actually went in with the highlight. This is the shade Regina, and this is actually, of course, meant for a highlight, but you can also use it for your eyes. So I added a little bit of some light to the center of the lid, but I found the pigment was not as pronounced as I wanted it to with a brush application, so I went in with my fingertip as well. Now you can leave it right here with this look if you want. It's softer, it gives me that Frozen vibe for sure, but this is actually a gorgeous look just to leave if you want. But what I did next was I added some glitter, and I did use their second latest release for that, which is the Good Vibes and High Tides. Nope, High Tides and Good Vibes. There we go. I used 2 glitters out of this one, and I did use glitter glue to adhere them. So the 2 that I did use was actually this one here as well as this one. So this one is a true silver and this one is a champagne color. Of course, with the glitter, it does make it bolder and sparklier. So this definitely amps up the look to a beautiful, bold, like mermaid with some glitter type style. So I have been really enjoying this look so far, but that is how I created this look today using mostly this Icy Betch palette with a little bit of some sparkle from that second release, that High Tides and Good Vibes palette. Now, when it comes to the highlight in this palette, today I used it mixed with my other highlight for my cheeks, but I also applied it by itself on my brow bone. And what I can tell you, this is a definite white frosty highlight. So if you don't like frosted looks, this might not be for you, but I do think that this is one that can be built up or it can be left pretty subtly on the skin as well. But keep in mind, this is quite white, so you're always going to get that frosty kind of icy look to the skin. Of course, that makes sense because this is a frosty, icy kind of theme. Now, when it comes to these shade names, these are super cute, you guys. Like, the shade names, I believe, are named after icy bitches. If I'm saying that right. We have a shade Veronica, which is, I think, from Riverdale, as well as Cheryl, which is also Riverdale. We have Becky, which I think is Becky with the good hair, I think, which is Jay-Z's mistress. I'm not sure. Let me know if that's wrong. Blair from Gossip Girl, I believe. Georgina from Gossip Girl. Regina from Mean Girls. And Vivian, I'm thinking is from Legally Blonde, but maybe that'll age me. But let me know if there's another Vivian in a recent movie, but I think that's supposed to be Legally Blonde. There's two names I'm not quite familiar with, Miranda and Arya. I think Arya is from Pretty Little Liars and Miranda is from Game of Thrones, but I could be wrong. So here are the swatches for you guys. As you can see, it's a gorgeous blue gradient. I do think this is one for people that love color, of course. If you are one that is not going to use color on a regular basis, I don't necessarily think this is something that you're going to need. But if you do see yourself in the market for a blue palette, I don't think necessarily that this is a bad option because based on my first impression, I do think that the blendability is there, the pigment is there for most of the shades, and it's just a cute, fun palette with the exception of this sticker really cheapening it because that drives me crazy. But other than that, I think this is not a bad choice. Now, when it comes to comparisons to other Tarte palettes, as you guys know, Tarte has not done blue for the first time in this Icy Betch palette. Of course, this is a palette with all blues and greens, but they have done blues in previous palettes. So it all started with this Be a Mermaid and Make Waves palette. This is a limited edition palette that is no longer available, but the shade at the bottom here, I'm just going to quickly show you. This is a little awkward to hold, but it's right here. And this one I thought was going to be pretty close to another shade in this palette here. Also, the Tarte Pro Remix palette has a blue that I thought might be pretty close, which is right here. And we also have the latest palette besides this Icy Betch one, which is the High Tides and Good Vibes palette. And this one has a couple blues in here that I was wondering if it was going to be pretty close. So these two right here I'm mostly talking about. Now here are the comparisons for all of those next to Icy Betch. We do have this shade Blair that is starred from the Icy Betch palette, and as you can see, the ones surrounding are very similar, all from the three palettes that I'm talking about. Then on the far left we do have swatches again showcasing Arya next to a High Tides shade as well. So as you can see, based on the comparison swatches, Tarte is not unfamiliar with putting a blue like this across many palettes in the past. But if you do have all of those palettes, let's say, and you're thinking maybe the Icy Betch one is not for you because there's too many duplicates, there are only two duplicates in my opinion in this Icy Betch palette. They are not the same formula because they do vary with finish, but there's also a lot of other blues and that one green that I haven't seen Tarte do. So I do think that this palette is different enough compared to the other palettes they have done. So lastly, I do want to touch on a question that I kept getting asked as soon as you guys found out that I was talking about the Icy Betch palette from Tarte. A lot of you guys were saying, hey, you need to compare it to the Blue Blood palette from Jeffree Star. So first of all, that palette is out of stock everywhere. Even if I wanted to purchase it, I couldn't right now because it is out of stock. But before I get started, I do want to mention a couple things. I am not necessarily like aligning myself with all of the behaviors that either Tarte has done in the past or Jeffree has done in the past. We've all heard of some things that Jeffree has said, the things that kind of surround maybe his branding and things like that. Honestly, I don't know him as a person. I don't want to necessarily judge from the exterior, but the things that I'm seeing, I don't all align with myself. Same with the Tarte company though. So on the other hand, some things that Tarte has done, I don't agree with either. I mean, pushing a foundation release where it's targeted to fair to light skin tones is appalling. Like, that's horrible. So the fact that they did that and the fact that Jeffree has done some things that have been questionable as well, I'm gonna kind of push that aside and just talk about the makeup today because a lot of you guys keep asking me to compare the two. So I don't have the physical palette obviously with me because it's sold out, but I do have this one. So I'm just gonna do a quick comparison based on the best true to life picture of the Blue Blood palette next to this one to let you guys know if I think that the Tarte one is a direct copy. Now, taking a look at the Tarte palette, what I can see is that there might be a couple shades that look like they're in the same family, but I think that Jeffree's palette as a whole is much more of a complete palette versus this palette here, which I think is going to be for most people's collections, probably an accompaniment palette where you have to use other palettes as well as this one to create looks. So you can definitely still do a look with this one by itself, but you will get limited because of the number of shades and the number of varieties within the shades. There's a lot of blues that'll translate pretty close on the eye, and then we've got that one green. So I do think that soon you will run out of ideas without supplementing this palette with another one, whereas the Jeffree one to me looks a little bit more complete. They do have the lighter beiges, some beiges, we have a mint in there, and then some deeper shades as well. So I do think that obviously there's more shades in the Blue Blood palette, but that one as a whole is much more of a complete palette you could probably use on its own for a longer period. Now, when it comes to the thoughts of that Tarte copied Jeffree, I do think personally that it does take some time to develop a palette, to release a palette. Obviously, there might be some things happening behind the scenes where maybe somebody tipped off Jeffree or tipped off Tarte as to who's making what, and now we're going to be competitive. That stuff I don't know because I'm not in the makeup development industry myself. I have never brought a palette to retailers or anything, so I don't know that, but what I have heard is that it takes a number of months to get this stuff together. So unless somebody tipped off somebody in the process behind the scenes, I don't think just because they lined up their release dates that it was necessarily a copy. But I do think that it could have been very purposeful that Tarte released theirs a little bit earlier than Jeffree's, now getting wind that Jeffree has a blue palette, so that could have happened. I also think too that Jeffree also could have gotten some inspiration from the original April Fool's palette that Tarte released a year ago, because maybe he thought, good idea, Tarte is not servicing their customers with this palette that everybody is wanting. It's a fool's joke, so I'm going to do something similar with my brand. That could have happened too. You never know. Either way, I do think that the Blue Blood palette, if you are wanting a more complete palette, that will be the palette to go for because of the light beiges and the dark mattes and things like that. This one will much more be an accompaniment palette in my opinion, but if you have a strong stance against Jeffree, that will probably make that decision for you versus if you have a stance against Tarte. I know a lot of people don't like supporting Tarte anymore since some of their decisions. So all of this is just up to you, but I wanted to bring the facts to you as unbiased as possible so you can make that decision for yourself. Anyways, guys, that is it for this video today. Please let me know down below, what do you think of this Icy Betch palette? Do you think this is something that you're going to be picking up yourself? I would love to know. What do you think of this look today? I know it's super bold and I was a little bit apprehensive to go on camera, but I think it turned out okay. It's definitely giving me some Frozen vibes with a little bit of glam. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to let me know by giving it a big thumbs up for me, as well as don't forget to subscribe. I would love to see you guys back here, and until my next one, guys, take care. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.
You and me, everything that we've been through has made us strong. You won't believe we've had our gray, but somewhere there's a light inside of us. It shows the way.